Welcome to Easttown Online. My name is Clint Dupin. First thing I want you to do, if you've never checked in with us here at Easttown, make sure you do that right now. Maybe you've been watching for a few months or weeks and you've never done that. It's simple. Simply text Easttown to 94000. We're not going to do anything weird, right? We're actually going to send you a gift. And here's the gift we're going to send you. It is a nice brand new ping pong. I'm kidding. I don't even know why we have it there. But we have our new Easttown mugs. We'd love to encourage you that way because I remember my first step on my spiritual journey. And I remember how excited I was, but I remember how important it was to have others around me to lead me. What was the next step that I need to take? Your first step, just to check in. We want to come around you and help you. And we know how hard that step is for some of you. So we would love to say thank you for taking that first step by sending you something. Now, we are in a new series. We've been in this series for a couple weeks, and it is called Heart Condition. We talked about this last week. You can go into the hospital or a doctor's office, and you can run tests on your heart to determine the condition of your heart. It's a little bit harder to determine the condition of your spiritual heart, right? Your soul. But there is a test, and it's what we're talking about all through this series. The test is the generosity test. And we said this truth last week. The condition of your heart is often determined by the level of your generosity. So think about that. Your level of generosity can usually determine where your spiritual heart is, right? The condition of our physical heart determines the quality of our life. If there's no heart, there's no life. If there's a diseased heart, the lack of quality of life that we have. The same is true when it comes to our spiritual heart. It's like if we are not generous people, we don't live our best lives yet, right? It's like the more generous we are, the more impact that we have. Think about this. If you go to a funeral, people aren't measured by how much they saved or how much they earned or how much they acquired. It's how much they gave away. It's how much they sacrificed their life for others. Now, I know for some of you, you're feeling this. If we're talking about generosity, then he's going to be talking about money, and I'm going to feel guilt, and I'm going to feel shame. And a lot of times we don't want the church to talk about money. We don't want to talk about generosity because there's some stuff around that we've been taught that isn't necessarily good. We hope that we can teach you something different, to live differently, because we believe this, that God desires for you to live in freedom. He desires that you live in freedom financially, not in bondage. But I know a lot of times what we think that we've earned this or I've made this and this is mine. I don't need you to tell me what's best for my life. And I'm saying that to you. I'm not pointing a finger at you. I'm pointing back at me as well. It's hard for when people step in on things that I feel like that I own or that I made or that I did. Like, I don't want that. It's just kind of my nature or that sinful nature that comes up. But we want to talk about it. So why is there so much tension around it? Why do marriages end when it comes to finances? Why is there so much corruption? Because we usually take our cues from someone other than God when it comes to our finances. If we're not going to God about our finances, or we're not looking to His wisdom, then what do? We kind of look at what's happening around us. What are my friends doing? How can I keep up with them? Look at what social media is trying to sell me. Think about what's broadcasted on the news. All of those different things. I take my cues. This is what matters. This is how you earn status in this world. But God has a different way of looking at that. So here's our goal, is to convince you that money and generosity is spiritual. Let me say that again. I talked about this last week, that money is spiritual. My goal, my desire at the end of the series or end of the day is not that you give more to Easttown. That's not my desire at all. So I want you to hear that, especially for those of you who have kind of are jaded toward the church or angry at the church or lack of trust. I don't want you to hear that. I just want you to listen in what God desires for you and when it comes to generosity. So I want to ask you this question. I want you to think about this. What if your money could talk? What if it could have a conversation with you, assuming that it wants the best for you? So if you sat down at a coffee table and so your wallet began to talk, what would it actually say to you? And what would your response be? Right? My response would be like, well, I made that decision financially because I thought it was what was best. You know, those $700 shoes, Kevin, right? Those $700 shoes I felt like were the best choice for me at that time. What if your money could talk? Now, I know for me, I know exactly what it would say. I remember graduating out of college and moving to California, just north of Sacramento, and I needed a vehicle. And I remember going to, the car lot, trying to figure out what am I going to buy. Now, I want to say this before. I was making $19,000 a year. That's all I had. I was paying off school debt, and I was making $19,000 a year. I go to a car lot, which I should have never gone to a car lot. Michael and I, my wife, we were dating at the time, and she went with me, and I began to look, and I say, I really want a Jeep because we're about an hour and 10 minutes from Tahoe. I want to go up there. And if you watch the advertisements with Jeeps, it's like everyone's happy, and they can go anywhere. They can go through rivers. They can climb buildings. You can do anything with a Jeep. And she's like, looking at the price tag, she's like, that price tag is literally more than your paycheck. There's no way you can afford that. I'm like, come on. I can make it work. I can make it work. She's like, no, that is the dumbest decision that you could make. But I was emotional about it. I wanted to make it happen. And I waited to I went home. She went back to her house. I get a call from that dealership. It's like, hey, we think we have a deal that we can make work for you. I'm like, all right, yeah, what is it? And they said, well, maybe you don't buy the Jeep. Maybe you just lease it. And I'm like, yeah, that's in the Bible somewhere, leasing. Let's do that. So I decided to lease the Jeep. Signed on the dotted line. Everything was good. I was so happy. Until I looked back at the fine print, and it was a lease that was for 66 months. Did you know 66 months is not 3 years or even 2 years? It's a lot longer. I overpaid. I should have bought 2 Jeeps at the end of my lease payments. It was awful. In fact, I tried to take the Jeep back and say, I don't want this anymore. I can't afford that. Too late, right? The way we handle money is a reminder that there is something wrong with us. Why don't we do what is best for us? And here's the shocker. The shocker isn't what our money would say. The shocker is this, is the parallel between what our money would say and what Jesus said. That's the shocker, if our money could talk. Because here's what I think. I want to give us the benefit of the doubt. I want to believe that most of us that are engaged in the conversation today, even though I know it's a one-way conversation, all of us that are engaged in this conversation today, I think that we would say, we're pretty generous people. I'm a kind person. I want to do what's right. I want to be more generous when I get to this point in my life. I want to give us the benefit of the doubt. But I think that there's this wrestling in our heart. I think there's this wrestling in our heart, in our soul that is happening. We want to be more generous. We want to live sacrificially. We want to do what God says, even if we don't necessarily believe in everything that God said. We want to do what He says, but at the same time, there's all of this pressure that is going on. There's all of this weight. There's almost this battle that is waging inside. Did you know that's nothing new? That's been going on since the beginning of time. And in fact, we go back to the New Testament. There's the Old Testament and the New Testament. And one of the chief authors, the superhero of the New Testament, his name is Paul. Like kids, if you're watching right now, who's your favorite superhero? Like I want you to imagine if there's a superhero that's in the scriptures, it's Paul. Like this dude was a good guy. Not at the beginning, but became a really good guy and did a lot of stuff good for the kingdom of God. That's who Paul is. And listen to what was happening in Paul's life. He says, and this is in the book of Romans, he says, I can anticipate the response that is coming. I know that all God's commands are spiritual, but I'm not. He says, isn't this also your experience? He's like talking to you. Yes, I'm full of myself. After all, I've spent a long time in sin's prison. What I don't understand about myself is that I decide one way, but then I act another. Some of you are listening to this right now. Some of you have been engaged with this conversation for years, maybe here at Easttown or at the church, and you hear it and you're inspired, but then you walk away from it and you do something completely different. This is what Paul is saying. So if I can't be trusted to figure out what is best for myself and then do it, it becomes obvious that God's command is necessary. What's God's command is God's plan, right? It's His kingdom here on earth is to be experienced. But he goes on, he says, but I need something more. For if I know the law, but I can't keep it, and if the power of sin within me keeps sabotaging my best intentions. Now, let me tell you what the law is. The law is what they had up until this point. There was no New Testament, right, at the time. So Paul was kind of grading his life off the previous stuff that was written, now what we call the Old Testament. He's like, I can't do that. Like, I'm wrestling with that. There are things in that law that I just can't live up to. And by the way, I just want to tell you this. A lot of times the law is to tell us only how sinful we are. We're going to break commandments. We're going to break those things. That's why we depend on the grace of God through his son, Jesus Christ. This is what Paul is saying. He says, I obviously need help. I realize that I don't have what it takes. There's this wrestling, right, that's going on. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyways. There's a lot of doo-doos, right? My decision, such as they are, don't result in action. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. Paul has a battle that is going on. It's rooted deep within. It's called sin. Right? It's called sin. We don't want to talk about that word sin. Sin entered into this world after the fall. We see that in Genesis, and it's like a big old screw just drove itself down into the world and messed us all up. And there's constantly this battle that's going on for right and wrong and good and evil and light and dark. Isn't it crazy that the voice that comes deep from within always has who? Who is the central figure? Paul is saying, me. I'm the central figure. When I think about finances, who do I think about first? Me. Now we can say, well, I was thinking about my kids. I think about my family. I think about that. It's like, but me, how does it benefit me? That's not what God intended. Now, I want to translate this into our culture and what is happening in our culture. If Paul were speaking to us, he writes the first book to the East Bayans. It's a word, it's in the Google, right? This is the American dream versus the kingdom of God. This is the wrestling match that is happening. Now, let me tell you what the American dream is. It's the thing that we battle when it comes to money is the American dream and God's kingdom. The American kingdom and the kingdom of God. Here's a definition of the American dream. See if you can identify. A life of personal happiness, right? We think the purpose of life is to achieve happiness. It's all about me. A life of personal happiness and material comfort as traditionally thought by individuals in the U.S. This is what we are being sold on a daily basis. This is what you have been sold since you were born. You deserve it. You're entitled. You are owed, right? You have the right. Now, I just want to pause. We know that the American dream was not for everyone. And especially that's been uncovered even over this past year. It's not for everybody. It never was. It was for a certain group of people, not for our sisters and brothers of color. This is one of the many reasons why it is so flawed. And I would say this, some of us are passing this flawed message down to the next generation. That we're trying to prevent our children from going through any type of hardship, that they deserve, that they need the best, that all of these things. I'm not saying like we don't want to protect our children, we don't want to give them the things that they desire or whatever, but I'm going to present something that's a little bit different here in just a moment. Do you know what is central to the American dream? You. It's me. It's all about me. And I think we know deep down that it is flawed. We have so embraced this as a culture. It is so ingrained. We make decisions based on this mentality and don't even think twice. So I want to clarify. There is nothing wrong with achievement or success. But when it comes at the detriment of others, when there is not equal opportunity for all ethnicities, when it clashes against what God desires, then there is an issue. The American dream often promotes the view of I worked hard, I earned it, and it's mine to do with it as I please. It's an entitlement. This suggests that we are entitled to any income that comes to us because we worked for it. But that's not what the Bible tells us about our money or possessions. In fact, the biblical view of our resources is just the opposite. It teaches us that all we have been given has been given to us by God. And in fact, we talked about this last week. It kind of just passes through our hands. Are we being good stewards of it? Are we treating it with responsibility? Are we allowing God to use it for the benefit of His kingdom? He has simply entrusted it to us. And there is a major difference between entitled and entrusted. Entitlement is we control it. Entrusted means we let go. Let me say that again. Entitlement means it's mine, I deserve it, it's all here. I close my fist. And by the way, we talked about this last week too. It's like when we think we have a grip on our money, in fact, it has a grip on us. Entrusted, we let go. We let go what brings the kingdom of God to earth. So I want to contrast that ideology of the American dream to the kingdom of God. The kingdom of the American dream, right? Versus the dream that God has for our life when it comes to His kingdom. And Jesus says this in Matthew 6, but seek, right? First the kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So Jesus is making it clear that there's a new set of goals. There's a new desire that we have. No longer do we pursue those things of this earth. We can enjoy them, but we seek, right, the kingdom of God. We seek kingdom goals. When we do this, we bring heaven to earth. How cool is that? That Jesus talked about the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven constantly. And one of the things that He always talked about, what's going to get in the way of that is money and materialism. It's going to be a blockade, right? It's going to be a lid that we can never break through. But He says, you as followers, you are the solution to bringing heaven here to earth. It's when our focus goes from me to others. I want you to listen to this because the kingdom is about compassion. The kingdom is for the poor, the hungry, the widow, the orphan. The kingdom is for equality and justice. The kingdom is about peace. The kingdom is where the haves help the have-nots. The kingdom is Jesus first. So, if our money could talk, does it fit more with the American dream? Or does it fit with the kingdom of God? And here is the amazing, supernatural, undeserved part of this. When we allow God, not when we put, not when we say, okay, it's okay. When we allow God to sit in His rightful place, we get the opportunity to bring heaven to earth. Think about what this would mean for your marriage. Think about what this would mean for our cities. Think about what this would mean for racial equality. Think about all the things that would happen because this was God's design. This is why Jesus came to this earth, to point us to the kingdom of God, to allow us to know what His Father desires and how we should live our lives. Now, I want to close with this because I believe what I've just shared and what I'm going to continue to share over the next couple of weeks resonates in our souls. But I think that there's this tendency to have an excuse. There's this tendency to push back because, well, what about me? And what about my desires and pursuits? Or I've lived my life so much this way. Is it too late? Because there's something in us that thinks that we know what we need, that we know better what's for our life. It's really hard, especially in a pull yourself up by your own bootstraps culture and society, that we turn over, that we entrust God with our lives, that we entrust God with our material items and finances. This is not, it's okay to wrestle with that. And I believe even Jesus's followers, even His disciples, the ones that went on to be the apostles, they wrestled with that because on this earth, we will always wrestle with that. That sin is always creeping in. And in fact, they go to Jesus and they ask this question, right? And Jesus responds by teaching them how to pray. Because they're asking all these questions. They're like, Jesus, we see how you're living your life and it seems like things are going good. It seems like your prayers are answered. It seems like but what about? And Jesus is like, let me share something, world. He says, the world is full of so-called prayer warriors who are prayer ignorant. They are full of formulas and programs and advice, peddling techniques for getting what you want from God. Don't fall for that nonsense. This is your Father you are dealing with. And he knows better than what you need. So it just goes back to what I was just talking about. A lot of times we don't want to surrender that. We don't want to give Jesus anywhere we'll give him certain things in our life, but we don't want to give him this area. And he says, he knows better than you what you need. He is the giver of life. He is the author and the creator of your own life. With a God like this, loving you, you can pray very simply like this. And so he gives us a prayer. So when you're having that wrestling moment, we simply say, our Father in heaven. We're acknowledging that he is over all creation. Reveal who you are. Set the world right. And guess who he uses to set the world right? You. Do what's best, as above, so below. Keep us alive with 3 square meals. Keep us forgiven with you and forgiving others. Keep us safe from ourselves and the devil. You're in charge. You can do anything you want. You ablaze in beauty. Yes, yes, yes. In that prayer, it's setting things straight. In that prayer, it's defining what's a priority. In that prayer, it's saying that God, I'm giving this over to you. Yeah, but I have this, and God, I don't know if you're going to have the same outlook on that and the same perspective. It's like, God, I'm acknowledging that you're king, and you're king over everything. Whether I believe it or not, I'm going to entrust you with this. And what does it say? That God will bless us with what we need. He knows what our needs are. And actually, when we allow this prayer to occupy the space of our heart, the things that we want so much, God knows. He knows how we were created. We were created uniquely with purpose and design. There's artists, right? There's people that are so good in the medical field. There's people that are great in the business field, in the marketplace. He knows that. And he's going to use you in amazing ways that you could not possibly imagine. So here's some application for you today. I want you to think through this. I want you to write this down on your maybe a little phone, a little pad that you have, because we are in the state of forgetting. We'll forget. Maybe today you start inviting God into how you deal with your finances, just one step at a time. Maybe you walk away from a purchase. Listen to this. And those of you who are close to me, you know I challenge you with the same thing. Maybe you walk away from a purchase and ask, does this purchase allow me to still have margin in my life to live generously or to impact people for the kingdom of God? Let me read that again. Maybe you walk away from a purchase and ask, does this purchase allow me to still have margin in my life to live generously or to impact people for the kingdom of God? I want to tell you this because your generosity can literally change the world. And you might be sitting there thinking, I'm just one person. Well, when I see somebody living generously, it motivates me to live generously. That one becomes 2. And maybe you're in a family, and as a father or as a husband, you're watching this right now. And when you start living generously, it inspires your family and inspires the next generation. And so 1 becomes 4 or 5 or 7. And that 10 turns into 100, and that 100 turns into 1,000. I think about what we did this past weekend, working in Oakland, providing these little places to sit outside of these little businesses, restaurants that were struggling financially to help them receive business. We were able to do that and provide that because people are living generously. And because we were able to do that, we're able to have conversations. I had multiple conversations with people that would walk by or people that, why are you doing this? How much are you getting paid to do this? I'm like, I'm not getting paid. These are all volunteers. And in fact, there's a church, there's a movement of people that gave to this to make this happen. It's contagious. Generosity is contagious. And maybe you've never started your giving journey. Today might be your day. And we say this every time. It's like just simply text GIVE, G-Y-V-E, to 313131. Start your journey today. If that's not you, if you're not ready to start that journey or you don't trust the church, then don't. Find somewhere to be generous today. I want to thank you for hanging in here with this conversation. This has been a tough one. And I'm excited about next week. I'm really excited about what's going to happen next week and even the week after. Thank you for being with us again, and I look forward to seeing you next week. God bless.